This program is brought to you by Emory University.
I can simply reiterate that wonderful last conclusion and let you go to your lunch. The advantage of being the last to speak, especially at the time that you're planning your lunch, is that everything that I wanted to say has been said perfectly well and eloquently, and there is very little for me to say except to cut to the chase, and I think that the custodians of the Islamic Republic ought to be ashamed of themselves. Mr. Khamenei should resign and step down and dismantle the office of Supreme Leader. Reconvene a constitutional assembly and get rid of all the undemocratic organs of the Islamic Republic, beginning with allowing women to run for presidency, and perhaps Ms. Shirin Ebadi will be our first president. Hopefully before Sarah Palin has become our president here. Now, like everyone else, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm a great admirer of Professor Naeem's work and his heroic attempt to make human rights and constitutionalism compatible with Islam and Islam compatible with a secular state. Delighted to see my colleague Juan Cole. Juan Cole and I make it to every list of dangerous professors. Not only the 101 most dangerous professors, but we are part of the first 7 most dangerous professors. So it's wonderful to see you, Juan. Equally delighted to see Ahmad Sadri. What you probably don't know is Professor Sadri is a distinguished sociologist and a great scholar of Max Weber. And I was very happy to see him in his wonderful clothes, because if he were in Iran, we would see him in prison pajamas because of his extraordinary scholarship on Max Weber. As you know, Max Weber and Talcott Parsons are now under indictment in the Islamic Republic. Grateful to all the young, energetic, wonderful students who have put this conference together. This is their movement. The Green Movement is their movement, much to the shame of my generation of Iranians. And we are here only as sounding boards. 80% of the Iranian population is under the age of 40. 70% of the population is under the age of 35. 50% of the population is under the age of 25. In other words, what we're witnessing is the population of Iran, extraordinarily young, is speaking a different language than these custodians of the Islamic Republic. And as a result, we are, as Professor Sadri said at the conclusion of his remarks, we are at a turning point, in fact, an epistemic shift in Iranian polity. The situation, unfortunately, is not as simple as Ms. Shirin Ebadi said, that people are on one side and the government is on the other side. Unfortunately, this is not the situation. One simple statistics will tell you that. In 1997, the high school graduates from Iran were 3 million. The entire university capacity of Iran is 242,000 in 1997. In other words, less than 10% of the high school graduates. In other words, 90% plus of the high school graduates pour into the market in an oil-based economy that does not have job, does not generate job, and they are absorbed in 3 layers of militarized security apparatus: Pasdaran, Basij, and Hezbollah. So instead of generating jobs and universities, the oil money has been spent in strengthening a militarized security apparatus. The reason that you see in the streets of Tehran demonstrators saying Basijis are your brothers and sisters, they are their brothers and sisters. So the apparatus of the Islamic Republic, security apparatus of the Islamic Republic, unfortunately is well interwoven into the system. It's not just 5,000 clerics that you can put them in a shuttle and send them to moon or something. This is not the way it works. The reality, however rigged the elections might have been, there are people who have voted for Ahmadinejad. So that is to be taken into consideration. My talk is going to be a combination of what Professor Cole and Professor Sadri did, a little bit of history and a little bit of contemporary analysis. And the date that I want to begin with, as Professor Chomsky did, is in fact 1953, the coup of 1953. 28 مرداد, as we say it in Persian. 28 مرداد has developed into a paradigm, into a trauma for Iranians, the coup of 1953. And not only everything that has happened after the coup of 1953, but in fact everything that has happened before 1953 is coagulated around this national trauma of foreign intervention and domestic tyranny. And the event, the nationalization of Iranian oil in the 1950s, was the epitome of anti-colonial nationalism in Iran. And it was defeated via CIA MI6 coup. 10 years after that, in 1963, we have the first attempt of Ayatollah Khomeini in Topoli regime, the June 63 uprising. And in June 1963 uprising, anti-colonial nationalism yields to militant Islamism in our political culture. And in fact, there is a famous conversation between Al-Ahmad, the famous public intellectual, who became a supporter of Khomeini, that this is the way to do it. And he wrote his famous book of the treasons of the intellectuals, etc. Almost a decade after that, we have the Siyah-Kal uprising in northern Iran, in which militant Islamism actually gives way to urban guerrilla movement of the socialist, Marxist type. So, by mid-70s, you have the three components of Iranian political culture: anti-colonial nationalism, militant Islamism, and a third world socialism in full operation. What happens in the course of the Islamized revolution of 1977-1979 is that the revolution takes advantages of these three strands of Iranian political culture in order to succeed. And as soon as it succeeds, then it tries to, and it succeeds to, dismantle, destroy, discredit, force them into exile, etc. As you know, my argument since the commencement of, you may know, commencement of this movement is that this is a civil rights movement and not the commencement of yet another revolution. And I want to explain why, based on this predicate. It is very important to go back, as Professor Cole did, to a little bit of history. Namely, from January 1979 to September 1980, and retrieve some of the crucial events that happened for the following reason. There are two ways for us to retrieve history. One is a vindictive and arresting way. For example, now, as soon as you say Mousavi, they say, oh, he was the prime minister and he killed so many people. You say Akbar Ganji, oh, he was a pastor and he did all sorts of nasty things. Do you follow? This is arresting, this is vindictive. But there is another way of retrieving history which is liberating in order to learn what happened and in order to be emancipated from it. January 1979, the Shah leaves Iran. February 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini returns to Iran. By which time, all the components of Iranian political culture, nationalist, socialist, and Islamist, both of Shariati type and Khomeini type, as Ahmad Sadri just explained it, were present in the streets, forming political organizations, publishing newspapers, magazines, etc. By March, late March, Khomeini orders a referendum for an Islamic Republic. April 1st, 1979, through this creative accounting system that they have, they declared Islamic Republic. 99.99% of Iranians wanted the Islamic Republic. April 1st. The summer of 1979 is a crucial summer. I happen to be, I was a graduate student at Penn, I returned to Iran. In the summer of 1979, the following things happened. Number one, the draft of the constitution was circulated in which Velayat Faqih did not exist as an item in June, mid-June 1979. And Khomeini approved it. On campus of Tehran University, people started gathering, debating items of this constitution and demanding the formation of Majlis Mu'assisan, and a constitutional assembly. It was after this point that Ayatollah Khomeini said, no westernized jurist is going to decide the constitution of the Islamic Republic, only the noble clergy. It is also at this time, after the circulation of the draft of the constitution, that the idea of the Velayat Faqih is being circulated, and Khomeini launches one of his fiercest attacks against what he called westernized intellectuals, Roshanfikr Gharbzadeh, and this allows the formation of a constitutional assembly, as in fact was on the agenda, as major figures like Ayatollah Shariat Madari, like Ayatollah Talabani, in fact advocated the formation of a constitutional assembly. And a Majlis Khobregan was formed in order to deliberate, all of them clerics, in order to deliberate the constitution. It is this time that there are massive rallies in Tehran University soccer stadium in support of a constitutional assembly. I happen to be there. The reason that now Friday prayers are in the soccer stadiums of Tehran University is because the soccer stadium of Tehran University used to be site of anti-Islamist demonstrations. And the Hezbollahis poured into it and confiscated it. This is the time that Ayandegan newspaper was writing eloquently and actively against the radical Islamization of Iranian political culture, and Hezbollah thugs went to Ayandegan and destroyed it and attacked it and so forth. This is the summer. Okay? By October of the following fall, you may recall, Shah came to New York for cancer treatment, and this was a godsend to Ayatollah Khomeini, that the trauma of 28th of Mordad, Bisasht Mordad, of the coup of 1953, again was re-agitated. People were actually afraid of yet another coup. This is a very important point. That Khomeini abused the fear of 1953 doesn't mean that the United States was not plotting another 1953. You follow? General Heuser was in fact in Iran. They were thinking of a possible coup. By November, the hostages are taken. The world attention is distracted to American diplomatic corps in Tehran. And by December, under the smoke screen of hostage crisis, the same constitution, Islamized, with the idea of Velayat Faqih, is put on referendum, December of 1979. While death to America and this and that, people are distracted by that. Yet another creative accounting, 99% plus vote for the Constitution of the Islamic Republic. By January of the following year, now Ted Koppel is counting the days in Nightline. The first presidential election takes place in Iran, and Bani Saad becomes the first president. By the following March, the first parliamentary election is taking part. And every alternative voice, anti-colonial nationalist or socialist, Mujahideen Khalq in particular, by the time they were still a legitimate operation in Iran, attacked, destroyed, disallowed to run for office. And the catastrophic hostage rescue attempt that happened in April exacerbated the situation. And by March of 1980, we had the systematic, violent, so-called Islamization of education of Tehran University. Some of the leading members of that group that Islamized the Iranian universities, namely expurgated it of non-Islamist elements, are now the leading intellectuals of the reformist movement, and rightly so. that should not be held against them. By September 1980, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, we had another situation, a war in the region. The hostages had performed their duties. By October, Shah died. By January, hostages were released. And by the time for 444 days that the world attention was distracted by the American hostages, a multifaceted, cosmopolitan, political culture. Please note, I don't call it secular. I don't have any use for that word. Cosmopolitan. A cosmopolitan political culture that has room for Islam, perfectly legitimate room, but is not defined by Islam. Islam, Islamic law in particular, is integral to Iranian political culture, but not definitive to it. We're an old people, old culture at the crossroad of history, pre-Islamic, Islamic, European, Chinese, Indian, African. I happen to come from southern part of Iran, and we have the confluence of 4 cultures in my region, my part of the country. Indian, Arab, Iranian, and African. And I'm a so far living example of it. That cosmopolitan culture, composed of multiple forces that were created in the course of history, were force-fed into a legalistic, akhbari interpretation of Shi'i law. Force-fed. And the convulsion that now you see is happening in the streets of Tehran is because of that force-feeding. Again, as Professor Cole said, Khatami became in the 1990s a manifestation of that cosmopolitan culture. It was not odd for somebody to know who Jürgen Habermas is. Habermas, Heidegger, Freud, what's his name? Marx was translated into Persian in 19th century. So was every leading intellectual and scientist of the 19th century. In a crescent that extends from Central Asia through the Ottoman territories, Eastern Ottoman territories, into North Africa. The formation of a cosmopolitan culture, which was destroyed, violently destroyed, militantly destroyed, through systematic over-Islamization, not that Islam is alien to Iran, obviously, over-Islamization of Iranian educational system, bureaucratic system, and etc., etc. And it is in the 1990s that, because the root of that cosmopolitanism is very powerful and strong in Iranian political culture, you began to have manifestations, in fact, in the very children of the revolution, such as Khatami and Mousavi and so forth. Now, what I believe has happened since the presidential election of 1997, student uprising of summer of 1999, and now the presidential election of 2009, is that the period of ideological contestation in Iranian political culture has epistemically, as we say, forgive the shop talk, exhausted itself. It doesn't go anywhere. The reason that these youngsters that you see them in the streets of Tehran, they are peaceful. They ask for their civil liberties. Yes, there are those who say death to this and death to that, and there are those who are actually supporters of the regime, but the main volume of the movement is a civil rights movement for civil liberties. It began with where is my vote? This is, in my judgment, the most revolutionary thing that has happened in the history, modern history of Iranian political culture. Our culture has been before this, where is my gun? Tofang Manku. This is in our folk songs. From where is my gun, we have reached where is my vote? Now, because, as my old mother used to say, because Islamic Republic is overtly conscious of its own illegitimacy, It begins to kidnap people off the streets, torture them, rape them, bury them in mass graves, because it knows that it is illegitimate. But this is not what these children out in the streets are asking for. All they ask was, where is my vote? The answer to it is, here is your vote. Not here is the gun and all the horrors that have happened over the last 2 months. If I am correct in this assessment, and over the last 2 months, I have tried to control my own critical ego and listen carefully. I have been going and reading weblogs and websites and so forth that I never even exist. I didn't even know exist. Is that violence is inimical to this generation. I urge you to go and read some of the most beautiful Persian prose written in our modern history in the weblog of Fatemeh Shams, who is a student in Oxford University, and her husband, Mohammad Reza Jalaipur, is in jail. To see what I mean by this is a non-violent generation. Violence is inimical to this generation. That the ideological warfare of my generation has transmuted from a struggle for political modernity into, and I'm not going to quote Habermas, I'm here in Atlanta, the prosecutor general doesn't have a control over me, into, I'm quoting Habermas, societal modernity. A transmutation of political modernity into societal modernity, from a grand narrative of democracy and this and that, into no, where is my vote? As Ms. Abadi said this morning, there are innumerable, perfectly fine elements of civil liberties within the Constitution of the Islamic Republic. Now, what I just said is not in defense of the Islamic Republic. My old leftist friend don't think I've gone cuckoo. I have problems with the Constitution of the Islamic Republic from the Bai Bismillah to Tai Tammad. But this is not my issue. If this regime is going to fall and we have a hammer and sickle up, the following day, the day after a socialist revolution, the question, where is my vote, is still legitimate. If the monarchists want to have Reza Shah II, be my guest. Go and do it. You can't do it from suburb of DC. You have to go to Iran, right? But the day after Reza Shah II is in power, the question, where is my vote, is still legitimate. Right? So this central question of where is my vote remains, non-violence remains, and the task, the extraordinary task, that certainly for my generation of Iranians is very difficult to ascertain, is for the violence, vile violence of the Islamic Republic not to determine the course of action of opposition to it. How the opposition remains nonviolent. Because there is every legitimate reason for this anger that you see. A government that is responsible for the protection of its citizens, to kidnap them off the street, take them to dungeons, rape and torture and kill them and bury them in mass graves. And then they have audacity to speak about the rights of the people in Gaza or Afghanistan. How dare you? The task is to connect, in my judgment, the civil rights movement in Iran to all liberation movements around the region. Even Gideon Levy, the progressive Israeli columnist, writes, I am green, I'm green with envy when I see these kids in the streets of Tehran. This is changing the moral map of the region, is an entirely new phenomenon. We have never seen the like of it. In my judgment, is not the precursor of a revolution, though it may end up. Whether or not Islamic Republic is going to fall within the next 3 days or 3 years or next 30 years is anybody's guess. But anybody, I'm going to conclude with a quote from Godfather. There is a wonderful scene when Don Corleone is talking to Michael, his son, and it says, anybody who comes to you and asks for this Barzini meeting, he's a traitor. Anybody who comes and tells you this regime is going to change within the next 3 days or 3 months and so forth, just don't listen.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.